President Trump says he thought running the country would be easier. The president also told Reuters he misses his old life before he became the most powerful person on the planet. Listen.
I loved my previous life. I had so many things going. I actually, this is more work than in my previous life. I thought it would be easier. I thought it was more of I'm a details-oriented person. I think you would say that. But I do miss my old life. I like to work, so that's not a problem. But this is actually more work.
President Trump said he used to be able to go out to restaurants and that he enjoyed driving. He says, "I can't drive anymore." During that interview, Reuters reporters said the president interrupted himself when he was talking about China and started handing out copies of his 2016 Electoral College map. He said they had the latest figures showing the parts of the country he won over Hillary Clinton. Let's bring in Fox News Sunday anchor Chris Wallace. Chris, he does have a fascination with that election and how it turned out. It's almost like he himself can't believe that he won.
Well, it is interesting, and he even brought it up again when he was talking to the NRA this afternoon. And I think he may still be a little bit surprised by it. And you know, I think there's a certain sensitivity there, that this continuing talk, whether it's about Russia or stolen votes or whatever, as to whether or not he's the legitimate president. He seems to be the only person who still has any doubts about that, except for the real haters. So I don't know why he keeps bringing it up, but I don't know. I wouldn't mind one of those maps. It'd be fun to see.
Yeah, the Wallace electoral victory. He seems a little wistful about his old life. I want to play a snippet of that for you now.
And while I had very little privacy in my old life, because, you know, I've been famous for a long time, this is much less privacy than I've ever seen before. I mean, this is, you know, something that's really amazing. At the same time, you're really into your own little cocoon because you have such massive protection that you really can't go anywhere.
It is interesting that a guy goes from private life, where, you know, no doubt he had security, to being inside the protection of the Secret Service, and he really does seem to miss the old lifestyle.
You know, and let's make it clear, Donald Trump had the most public private life imaginable. He was one of the most famous people in America. As you say, he had private security long before the Secret Service. But I got to tell you, John, every president I've ever talked to or read about had the same feeling. I remember covering Ronald Reagan back in the 80s, and at one point he wanted to go out to the local stationery shop because he wanted to buy a birthday card for Nancy, and the Secret Service said, no, you can't do that. And Barack Obama used to say that he longed for the days when he used to just be able to go out, walk around the neighborhood, even as a senator, and go to a bookstore and just browse a bookstore. So it's a very special bubble, but it is a bubble, and or a cocoon, or whatever you want to call it. And you know, again, the fact that, as he says, he loves to drive, and he's not able to drive himself anymore. There are a lot of things about it that seem quite glamorous, and you're in the White House and Air Force One and all of that, but the simple things in life and the ability just to be able to walk down the street, which even as Donald Trump could do, now President Trump can't.
Perhaps that will improve when his wife Melania and their son Barron are able to join him full-time in the White House. They're still in New York City while Barron completes his school year, as I understand it. He did touch on one of the big crises of the day, which is ISIS and what to do about it. Here is the president on ISIS.
We can't let them come over here. I will say there is an end, and it has to be humiliation. There is an end. Otherwise, it's really tough, but there is an end. We are really eradicating some very bad people.
Obviously, it was one of the thorniest issues that faced him when he came into the office. We just got word of another strike against an ISIS leader in the Arabian Peninsula today. But clearly, you know, the president wants to take out ISIS, and he's making some progress in that regard. It's just a question of whether ultimately it will be successful.
Well, and also whether he's willing to make enough of a commitment. Remember, He promised during the campaign, and as soon as he came in, he asked, I think it was 30 days, he gave the Pentagon to come up with a plan. He's had that plan on his desk for some period of time. But when you talk to top generals, they say that to do it, you're going to need a commitment of more troops on the ground in Syria, in Iraq. If you really want to take on, you can't do it by the air, you can't do it by advising, you can't do it by using militias in Syria. You're going to have to commit more U.S. forces. That's a major national security decision. It's a major political decision. And so far, at least, the president has not made that decision to really go all in. Not saying that necessarily is the right thing to do. Obviously, there are a lot of reasons why you don't want to get more involved in Syria and Iraq and all of the political quagmires in both of those. But the plan has taken up till this point is not a plan for victory against ISIS.
Chris Wallace, Fox News Sunday. Chris, thanks for joining us today.
This is a Fox News Alert. I'm Kimberly Guilfoyle, and this is the 5. Tensions are rising tonight as North Korea attempts to launch another mid-range ballistic missile. But for the second time this month, the test fire ended in a failure. President Trump, who yesterday said the U.S. was potentially headed towards, quote, major conflict with North Korea, weighed in on this rapidly developing situation on Twitter, writing, quote, North Korea disrespected the wishes of China and its highly respected president when it launched, though unsuccessfully, a missile today. Bad. Trump advisor Sebastian Gorka said North Korea was sending a message with its latest provocation.
We are not surprised that the new test occurred, but nor are we surprised that it was a failure. Nevertheless, despite it being an embarrassing failure, the reality is it demonstrates intent. When you are looking at any potential threat, whether it's somebody who wants to commit murder or whether it's a nation that wants to go to war, you look at two things, Sean. You look at capability and you look at intent. North Korea has both capability and intent to destabilize.
Fox News analyst Charles Krauthammer noted the attempted launch came after the Trump administration repeatedly warned the Hermit State to change its behavior.
It seems to me simply a deliberate provocation. With us at the Security Council, with our Secretary of State presiding over the meeting, with all the threats, with the president saying we're near, or at least there's a threat of a major conflict here, trying to challenge the Trump administration and say, well, show us what you got.
Okay, so Dana, obviously a very developing situation right at this hour, but what do you think the Trump administration should be doing in terms of its messaging right now as it relates to North Korea and also China?
Well, I think that they've had remember when Rex Tillerson, the Secretary of State, said, I'm sorry, it was the Vice President, he said the era of strategic patience has come to an end. Rex Tillerson has been very sparse in his words. They're not giving Kim Jong-un the attention that he seeks. And today, well, besides the president's tweet, the official statement from the White House press secretary's office was, yes, we know about the test, and yes, the president has been briefed. And no more things about, oh, well, we have to all get together, the world community has to really work on it. I did think it was really interesting yesterday that Rex Tillerson said in an interview with NPR that the United States would be willing to seek and wants direct talks with North Korea. We haven't said that before. That is a new foreign policy position for the United States, and they didn't really go further on that, but I think what they're starting to realize is Kim Jong-un is certainly under pressure. We don't understand a lot about the regime because it's so secretive and such a hermit, but it is under tremendous pressure, and he is losing face. So he's embarrassed, and he's trying to show that he does have this weapons capability, and I think that maybe we're going to provoke him into doing something where we could possibly show him that we can push him back into the Stone Age.
Okay, and Bret Baier, welcome to the program.
Thank
Great
you.
to have you. And you were taking in this breaking news earlier today as it relates to North Korea. How do you see this unfolding?
I think the administration has a lot of confidence in the relationship that was established in Mar-a-Lago between the president and the Chinese president, and they don't talk about all the things that China's doing. But I think they're doing more than we know that they're doing. The fact that there are fuel shortages in Pyongyang suggests that perhaps they're turning the screws on them. That's key for this to go along the track that the administration wants. I think there's a lot of concern that this tension rises and gets to a point where the North Korean leader is backed into a corner, and China is the linchpin to take it out of that moment.
Juan, it does seem that President Trump is working quite nicely, cooperatively with President Xi of China, which I think is really a key relationship to continue in good stead, especially given sort of the turbulent dynamic that we're dealing with in North Korea.
So on Fox this morning, I saw KT McFarland talking about the relationship with China and suggesting that China really is in a key position to influence what's going on. But it begs my reason, because to me, the idea that they are doing more missile testing seems to me to be quite intentionally suggesting that they want to display their military might at this moment, and they're not listening to anybody. So the United States has sent an armada of ships in that direction. Sometimes say we've sent the ships in the wrong direction, but anyway, in the neighborhood. And then you've got a situation where people feel directly threatened. Now, we know this man has nuclear weapons. That's pretty serious. And, you know, you can make jokes about Trump being erratic and Kim Jong-un being erratic and which one has nukes and, oh, they're both. But it's not, to me, this is way beyond humor. This is a threat to the stability of that entire region, and I don't see the Chinese reacting in the way we are. So, you know, people say, oh, we could bomb them back to the Stone Age. That is not to our advantage. Poll numbers, a Fox poll. I don't know if you saw this Fox poll, Brett. It said most Americans say, yeah, go get them. I think that's the start of a major, major world war. That's a world war.
I think that's not what that poll said. I think that the poll said Americans are willing to have the United States take proactive action if it needs to in order to protect our country if he has the capability of having a weapon that can reach our shores.
Well, in fact, they had a video. I don't know if you saw this in the news today. The North Koreans on their propaganda channel put out a video with a picture of the White House, and they were blowing up the White House. I think these folks just want to... They're sticking it to Donald Trump, and they want him to overreact.
They're trying to poke the cage or poke the oval, and it seems like a lot of bravado and machismo. Nevertheless, it's a very serious conflict that we have right now that's developing, Greg.
Is it really?
It is.
Is it? I don't know. Let me give you some perspective, Juan.
Okay.
They shot a former Scud missile 25 miles, and it broke up in flight into the water. They routinely do this, and we always play along. Do we need to care or respond the way we always do? We don't. This is like the kid in the neighborhood who has to show off by popping a wheelie, all the time popping a wheelie, and he always ends up on his butt over tea kettle, as they used to say.
Oh,
so the good news about this is, from Trump's tweet, which I found he pulled China into the tweet. He said he pulled China onto his side. He said, hey, you're disrespecting China, too. And so superpowers, in a way, are like superheroes. Generally, they're against each other, Batman versus Superman. But when there's an enemy or that is a force that is more evil than both of them, then they unite. They team up to fight. So there's something positive coming here. We don't know what kind of impact this is going to have and what China's going to do. But it seems to me that China and America are working together, and I think that's important as well.
And the other thing that we don't talk about a lot is whether the U.S. was behind some of the failures.
Right.
The last one, you know, they give you a smile and a wink in Washington and intelligence officials, and who knows what happened today, but I think that the U.S. may be pushing that kid with the bike over.
Right, which is always a lot of fun.
But because in North Korea the only access that they have is the propaganda channel, all they know is that they're sending off missiles. They don't know that they broke up 25 miles off of the sea.
But that's why he's right. There were so many, you know, in the intelligence community behind the scenes, like giving you that wink and nod. We don't think that they're going to be able to get a missile launch successfully completed anytime in the near future. It doesn't mean they're not going to be able to overcome any capabilities in terms of cyber hacking. So that's why this is.
But let me just tell you, you know, that South Korea and Japan are not very far.
I understand that.
So if they start, you know, going after, and remember, we have troops, as you pointed out yesterday, we have troops right there. I think 30,000 troops in South Korea.
On the line, yep.
30, that's 30 miles, right? 35. So 35, says Dana Perino. So.
Can I hear 40?
All right. But my point to you is that starts big trouble.
Yes, but that's the point. This is a pattern that you get from President Trump that is now bordering on the mundane, and it's positive. What President Trump does is he sprints to the most extreme pole, and then he stands there and he waves. And he waits for everyone else to get alarmed and then move a little bit toward him, which is what everybody wants. He now has created moderate progress with China. He's not interested in waging a war. What he did was he went to the most extreme pole, raised concerns, and then people stand up and go, oh my God, what's going on? And then they move toward him. He did this with China.
Right.
He did this. He did this with immigration.
Right.
He did this with Syria. It's his pattern, and it seems to be working.
Well, and this was also